This episode of Inside Golf Podcast is brought to you by Inside Sports Network.
What's up, everybody? It's your boy, Boston Capital Twitter, Steve, on the Hold the Green podcast.
All right, we are live. Tap in, birdie.
All right, Carson Young is here.
I bet Ludwig at 28.
Let's go. I bet
You
him
did
at,
too?
I bet him at 25.
Low sevens. I think there's some guys in here we like.
Harris English at 7,300.
I love Brian Harmon at 3.5% this week.
What's up, guys? It's producer Cam here. ISN is now partnered with Shorty's Golf. Shorty's Golf is designed to provide kids with the perfect introduction to the game of golf by offering high-quality clubs and equipment specifically tailored to their need. They offer custom sizes for various age groups, ensuring that the kids have clubs that are tailored to their height and strength. They feature fun, vibrant colors and lightweight stand bags that are easily adjustable. Each set features real stainless steel clubs, high-quality materials, and sturdy construction, making them long-lasting while providing a real golf experience. So go check them out, golfshorties.com. Use ISN15 at checkout for $15 off your purchase.
This episode of Inside Golf Podcast is brought to you by Inside Sports Network. PGA Championship Week is here, and we would love to have you as part of the community, even if it's just for a weekly pass. I can assure you, you will get everything that you pay for and then some. We really go all out for these major championships weeks. The Discord is humming 24 hours a day. You are getting my article. I have 5,000 words coming on Quail Hollow. That is a much more expansive version. Try and save most of the good stuff for that. This podcast generally just scratches the surface. I go a lot more in depth in that article. Obviously, ownership is huge for these major weeks. You are at a disadvantage using bad ownership in these big contests for major championship weeks. If you take DFS seriously, having the right ownership needs to be a baseline. Like, that is square one. If you are going to attack the DFS slate correctly, you need to know what the market is doing. And I am highly confident that the ownership that we provide at Inside Sports Network is the best in the business. We have a live odds screen as well behind the paywall for our members. So finding the best number, seeing where the market is moving on these major weeks, super, super important. And we have the best place where you can see real-time odds movement. We update it multiple times a week for these major championships weeks. It's a really good tool, not just in terms of seeing how the market has moved and where the market is going, but also when you're shopping for the best number. And I encourage everyone to certainly do that, particularly on these major weeks, because you're going to have books post some crazy numbers. Not every book is going to be aligned, and there's going to be much better prices on players on some books rather than others. We have that in a screen that aggregates all of that for you, not to mention, obviously, the premium show on Wednesday night, which is really our bread and butter. We talk through the entire DFS slate from top to bottom, the whole top of the leaderboard at Philly Cricket. We were heavy on all of those guys: Straka, Lowry, Hideki, everywhere. So hoping for a good Sunday run out for once in my life. That would be some phenomenal momentum heading into the PGA Championship. Lowry or Straka is probably what I need the most, but I would not be mad whatsoever at a Hideki win. The two guys that I faded at the very top that I don't have any exposure to are Keith Mitchell and JT. So any outcome that involves Straka, Lowry, or Hideki. I could really use a nice Sunday round from Cantlay, Tommy, and Morikawa as well. But a lot of Tony Finau as well, one of the best plays on the slate. That was another guy we talked about heavily on the Wednesday show. And point being, it's just the place you want to be for these major championships. If you are listening to this podcast in the first place, then that means you crave a deeper level of analysis. You care about getting the best golf course information and handicapping information out there. And I promise you, on these major championship weeks, you want to be a part of that community. So InsideSportsNetwork.com. Like I said, we would love to have you even just join us for a week. All right. Second major championship of the year. I've already talked with Steve a fair amount about the golf course. Right? I released that podcast on Friday morning. So I'm not going to spend as much time on the golf course in this podcast. I'm going to try and spend more time on the betting board and who I think is going to win. But there are a couple more loose ends on the golf course that I want to touch on before we dive into the betting board, because my opinion on the golf course has changed even a little bit further since I last came on here and spoke to you guys with Bamford. It's Sunday morning, 9 a.m. Pacific time. So the leaders tee off for Philly Cricket in about 2 hours or so. We've already seen some highly relevant players at the PGA next week that are their tournament's over by now. I'm talking about guys like Victor Hovland and Ludwig, some interesting names that we'll expand upon further as the podcast goes on. More on those guys a little bit later. But I think the biggest loose end in terms of the golf course that I don't know if I highlighted enough in the Bamford pod is the weather, and how the weather is going to play an impact on this PGA championship. And if you don't understand how important the weather is to identifying how a golf course plays, I think Philly Cricket was a perfect example of this, where you really got to see firsthand the difference between wind and no wind, the difference between a soft golf course and receptive greens versus what happens and how much completely different of a test it is when the greens start firming up. I mean, literally on Thursday morning at Philly Cricket Club, it looked like the easiest golf course in the world. It was just driver wedge. We were joking about it in the Discord, like you could make birdie on pretty much every hole. You know, you guys were on pace to shoot 30, 35 under par. On Friday, we got some rain. Most of the field played in moderate to heavy rain for most of the day, and it was a much different golf course. It was obviously a lot more difficult playing in the rain. And then on Saturday and Sunday, the golf course started to firm up a little bit. We got some sunlight. A little bit of the cloud cover was removed, and we got some wind as well. And it's played about as challenging as I would hope for from a golf course that only measures 7,100 yards. And I would say definitively the architecture of this golf course has held up and made a real difference, as much as one can when you are a golf course that is really that short and you have such low proximity buckets in terms of the clubs and the yardages in that players have. At Quail Hollow, it looks, unfortunately, like we are going to get some rain tournament week. Not only are we going to get some rain tournament week, but we are also going to get some rain once the tournament starts. And like I said, as we saw last week with Philly Cricket, when a golf course gets soft and receptive, and the greens are soaking wet and it just turns into the backspin open. Now it's going to be a little bit different at Quail Hollow versus Philly Cricket because, it's a lot more long irons versus wedges. But when greens are soft and receptive, how much easier the golf course plays in terms of players being able to hit the green in regulation, particularly with a middle to long iron, it's completely night and day. And what I'm seeing right now when I'm looking at the forecast for Charlotte, it looks like they've got some rain, and I'll confirm with some members. We're going to have a bunch of great member information in the Discord as well this week. And again, that's one of the major reasons why you got to be in that Discord, because what I say on this podcast on Sunday morning in terms of how I end up feeling about the golf course, it sometimes becomes night and day by the time we get to Wednesday. And I'm talking about the golf course on that Wednesday night show. But as it stands now, we're getting a fair amount of rain on Monday during the day. It looks like Tuesday is going to be dryish in the morning, but then more rain on Tuesday afternoon into Tuesday evening, and then some more rain on Wednesday. Once we get to Thursday and Friday, it looks like the golf course dries up a little bit on Thursday and Friday, but then you're getting more rain during the afternoon on Saturday and even more rain during the afternoon on Sunday. Now, that can change in an instant. Like I said, this forecast that I'm looking at as I sit here on Sunday morning, by the time we get to Thursday, I could feel a hell of a lot different about the golf course. But as it stands now, I unfortunately believe that the softness of this golf course is going to be a major narrative talking point storyline this week. And it's not good for scoring. I mean, we saw this is a harder golf course than Valhalla, and it is going to play harder than Valhalla. But you saw what happens to a venue last year with Valhalla when the golf course gets soft, and it really turns into a putting contest, right? Like Valhalla at the end of the day last year, when you go back and look at the stats, was either driver, long iron, and then so much emphasis on putting. Like you got to make all of your putts from 5 to 15 feet, and putting was a highly, highly correlated skill at Valhalla because of the higher greens and regulation percentage and the softer greens. Like I said, with Quail Hollow, it's not going to be 20 under par, but do I believe that somebody could probably get to 15 or 16 under par on a very soft golf course? Probably I do. And I was looking at this golf course on Friday when I talked with Bamford, expecting it to play at least relatively firm and fast, right? Certainly not what we saw at the 2017 PGA. And that's another key difference that I want to point out again on this podcast, just to hammer home this point. Like, if you are looking at the 27 PGA as this major reference point for how Quail Hollow is going to play, that is a non-ball knowing take. That is like very, very lazy handicapping and golf course analysis. This golf course has been completely overseeded, and it is going to play completely different agronomically than what we saw in the 2017 PGA. If you want a reference point on Quail Hollow, you are at least far better suited looking at previous Wells Fargo leaderboards and Wells Fargo scoring and Wells Fargo correlated skill sets, because yes, it's going to be harder. The rough is going to be thicker this week than your typical Wells Fargo, which last year Rory won at 17 under par, scoring average of 0.73. The prior year scoring average of 0.12, the prior year 1.19, 0.57, 0.92. So generally, a typical Wells Fargo plays at between I don't know, half a stroke under par and a little bit over a stroke over par. And that's probably what we're looking at this week is on a wet golf course, it's not going to play that much harder than a stroke over par. And just to place in context, like throw Valhalla at the window, that was ridiculously easy and soft. But Oak Hill, for example, played 2 strokes over par, a little bit over 2 strokes over par. Southern Hills played a little bit over 2 strokes over par. That's not the PGA Championship that I think we're getting this week. This is far more of a PGA Tour golf course than it is a worthy major championship venue in the same vein as Kiowa or Oak Hill or Southern Hills. Those golf courses are like championship golf courses. And Quail Hollow to me falls just a notch below that. And I don't think, based on the softness that I'm seeing now, if they end up playing in a lot of rain, then you saw what impact that had on scoring at Philly Cricket, where if you're like actually playing in the rain, then it becomes super, super hard. And we saw that at Oak Hill in 2023 as well. But as it stands now, based on the softness of this turf and the overseed, this is probably looking to me like a scoring average of 1 stroke under par and a winning score probably at 11 to 15 or 16 under par. So let's put some finishing touches on the golf course, and then we're going to dive into who I think is going to win. Just to further outline and finish with the key changes from the typical Wells Fargo and what is going to be different this week from the typical Wells Fargo that you need to highlight this week versus the Quail Hollow that we're used to for the Wells Fargo every year. Here are the final things that I would point out and touch on before we get into the betting board. So obviously, the key word here is overseed, right? And when the PGA Championship came here in 2017 in August, the golf course was not overseeded. It featured true, firm, fast Bermuda grass, kind of like what we saw at Pinehurst last year from head to toe. Um, and that clearly explains why it played demonstrably harder than a typical Wells Fargo, right? It was not just the PGA Championship and the PGA of America attempting to set the golf course up more difficult. When you get a non-overseeded golf course that features just pure Bermuda grass, that is always going to play more challenging than an overseeded golf course. Why? Because overseeding a golf course creates consistency. It takes a lot of the grain out of the greens. It takes a lot of the splotchiness and the patchiness out of the rough. It is far easier to read putts on overseeded greens. It's far easier to make putts on overseeded greens. And it's far easier to hit iron shots out of overseeded ryegrass rough than regular Bermuda. I see it at my golf course every single year because my golf course just got overseeded to host the LPGA event. And as soon as that golf course gets overseeded, my scores go way down. They go way down because I'm getting the same shot out of the rough every single time. I'm not getting those shitty, inconsistent, splotchy lies out of Bermuda grass rough where the ball sits down like it's in a little bit of a crow's nest. Like when you have an overseeded golf course, it creates the most pure, consistent, easy conditions for these guys to navigate. And I don't like where we're headed with this overseed trend and overseed nation. This is the second time ever that I believe a major championship has been fully overseeded. The first was Kiowa, and they still actually got Kiowa to play somewhat firm and fast, or you at least got some wind at Kiowa. But the direction that we are going with these overseeded golf courses now for major championships, what it's just doing is PGA Tour-ifying the golf course, right? And we see the PGA Tour is heavily trending in the direction of more and more overseed, less true Bermuda. We saw it happen at to PGA National, right? At the Honda Classic, where the golf course just plays completely different and so much easier when it's overseeded. And the fact now that we're doing it to major championships, and I understand why they're doing it. You almost have to do it in May with the heat. I get it, but it's going to play far more similar to the 2024 Wells Fargo, which was also overseeded, than it will the 2017 PGA Championship, which was not overseeded. And understanding that we want to be looking at the past couple of Wells Fargo championships here more than the 2017 PGA Championship, that is like step one in handicapping this tournament, is understanding the overseed and understanding what overseed does to a golf course and how much easier it makes a golf course, both in terms of putting and in terms of hitting iron shots out of overseeded rough. We saw a fair amount of changes to Quail Hollow in the summer of 2023. So that 2024 Wells Fargo, where Rory and Xander lifted and separated, is really our best reference point for how the golf course is going to play this week. Some other changes: the 9th hole was also lengthened by 25 yards. Previously a 485-yard par 4. It's now going to play as a 510-yard par 5. But the biggest change to be cognizant of between how the golf course played for the 2024 Wells Fargo and how it will play for the 2025 PGA Championship is the actual rough height. And I talked about this a little bit on the podcast with Steve, but Quail Hollow is going to now feature 2.75-inch overseeded rough as opposed to the regular 2-inch rough for the Wells Fargo. And that is going to certainly, I would say, increase the challenge of this golf course off the tee. Like, typically, Quail Hollow is not a super challenging golf course off the tee. It's not as difficult as a driving test as Torrey Pines or Bay Hill or Muirfield Village. All of those golf courses are harder golf courses off the tee than Quail Hollow. And I think, if anything, the rough being a little bit higher than what we see at your typical Wells Fargo, it's going to at least increase the challenge of off the tee at Quail Hollow and make it a little bit easier for great drivers of the ball to lift and separate. Great drivers of the ball could already lift and separate at a golf course like Quail Hollow because, based on the architecture of the golf course, there is just a big advantage if you have a high carry distance based on some of the way that the longer par 4s are canting. I talked about this with Steve in the podcast as well, so I won't belabor the point, but like the first hole at Quail Hollow is a really good example of this, where if you are able to hit a high draw and you have this 330-yard carry distance, based on the way that the hole is moving, and on a lot of these dog-legged par 4s, you have bunkers guarding the inlet of the dog leg. A player like Rory McIlroy can cut the corner of that dog leg and have like 140, 150 yards in on their approach shot, when other players on that hole may have an approach shot of 200 yards if they can't, or even longer if they can't cut the corner of that dog leg. I mean, it is really, that was my biggest takeaway from like multiple conversations that I've had this week with members who play Quail Hollow on the regular. They all talk about this is a drawers golf course off the tee, and you can gain a huge advantage. This is why this has historically been the best golf course for Rory McIlroy over the course of his entire career. And it's also why Benny On plays well here too. But you can gain a significant advantage on this golf course if you are able to hit a high draw with a 320 and 330 yard carry distance. And that's why the last time we had a tournament at Quail Hollow, the first three guys on the leaderboards that lifted and separated were Rory, Xander, and Benny On. And what do Rory and Xander and Benny On all have in common? They can hit a high draw off the tee. And that's not a super common ball flight. Like a lot of players on the PGA Tour, a lot of great drivers of the ball on the PGA Tour hit like a tight cut, right? They have that same ball flight that we see often from a Corey Connors or a Colin Morikawa, where the ball hits its apex and then it starts moving from left to right with cut spin. If you can work the ball from right to left at Quail Hollow off the tee, and outside of Rory, Xander, Benny On, Bryson is the other main guy that comes to mind here. I mean, Bryson hits a cut from time to time as well, but in terms of having that shot in the bag, like a golf ball that can work from right to left with draw spin and also has the 320 to 330 yard carry distance, you can gain such an advantage off the tee on this specific golf course based on the architecture of a lot of these par fours and the way that the holes are moving. But at the end of the day here at Quail Hollow, it is really one of them, and this will transition us into talking about the players and my model. But the biggest two things for me this week are either carry distance or long iron play, right? If you're not a great driver of the golf ball, you can still make up for it on this golf course with awesome long iron play. Like when Wyndham Clark here won in 2023, he actually ranked first in the field in approach play and was hitting his long irons tremendously well. So you don't necessarily have to be Bryson or Rory off the tee if you are like a highly, highly skilled long iron player, but you 100% need one of those two things. And then the final main thing that is like just as much of a key separator here for me this week, I would put it like number one, I always take the ball striking, right? Number one, I'm taking the carry distance slash long iron play, but putting at Quail Hollow, and it's going to be even more this week because of the higher greens and regulation percentage and the softness of this golf course. Quail Hollow has always been more of a spike putting golf course than it has been a true spike approach golf course. I mean, you look at the strokes gain pie for top 10, top 5 finishers and winners, it's actually more of a spike putting golf course than it is a spike approach golf course. And it's just a golf course where, you could win this tournament based on the strength of a super, super hot putter. You can. And I guarantee that we will see somebody contending to win this tournament who gains 7, 8 strokes putting on the greens and is just having that perfect putting week where they make everything. That player at this golf course can win this tournament. And I don't think that that's something we're going to see at Oakmont in a couple weeks' time. Like, we'll get to Rory, Scotty, and Bryson in a second, because I think those three players are at such a tremendous advantage this week based on the way that they're driving the ball and as well as the way that they're putting the ball. But if you're asking me to tell you the difference between how Rory, Scotty, and Bryson fit at Quail Hollow versus, say, Oakmont in a couple weeks' time, I do think that you can win this PGA championship by catching an insanely hot putter. And I don't think that you can do that at Oakmont. And that's probably the best argument for why one of those three players won't win this golf tournament, is that you actually can win this golf tournament with your putter. But the counter argument to that, and the problem with why I think one of those three players is like has to win this golf tournament or will just be at such of an advantage over the rest of the field, is those three guys are putting so well too right now. Those three players, like of the elite players on the PGA Tour, the best putters this season have been Rory and Scotty. This is the best putting that Scotty, this is the best Scotty's ever putted in his entire career. And we obviously know Bryson is an excellent putter as well. Bryson's putted great on Quail Hollow's greens in the past, and he's having another solid putting season on Live as well. Rory's having, for his standards, a relatively great putting season too. So we'll transition here into the model in a second, but just at a macro, super elementary level, it is driver putter for me. It is high carry distance slash great long iron play and great putting, great lag putting, great putting from 5 to 15 feet, great putting on overseeded greens. You can really win this golf tournament that way at Quail Hollow. So I threw all of this together in a model. You can find that model on betspurtsgolf.com. This is the place that you need to be modeling. There are many reasons for that, but it's not a super serious model if you're not using the BetSperts data. I'll give you a great example of this. Is like a lot of these other sites don't have strokes gain data from Augusta, and Augusta is tremendously important this week. Like, not only are there a lot of similarities in terms of required skill set between Quail Hollow and Augusta, but Augusta is a great comp in terms of the short game shots and putting that you're going to see at Quail Hollow, right? Like, Quail Hollow now has a lot of short grass around the greens, and if you have shown that you could chip and putt your way around Augusta really well, if you've shown that you can chip and putt your way around Congaree really well, and even Memorial Park really well, another golf course with these big undulating greens and a fair amount of short grass surrounding them that allows you to do some lag putting, allows you to have some creativity around the greens. I mean, Congaree is really the best example of this, because that's a Fazio golf course as well. And, I watch Quail Hollow on the PGA on the PGA Tour every single year. And I spent 2 days at Congaree in November, and I walked away from that golf trip being like, oh, this is literally the most similar golf course to Quail Hollow that you can get. And what do you know? Rory McIlroy wins there as well. So betspurtsgolf.com, you are going to get the best filters, the most high quality data and information for modeling. And again, if you're using a model from a different site, you're just going to be at a disadvantage this week to all of the people that are using BetSpurt. So if you want to see my model as well and all of the inputs, if you want to make your own model, betspurtsgolf.com. The promo code that you want for 25% off is Inside Golf, and that gives you 25% off. That's a very, very healthy discount. So anyway, top 20 in my model this week. Let's run through it. Okay. 1, Rory McIlroy. golf course was clearly built for Rory McIlroy. I mean, I could not think of a golf course architecturally that is a more perfect fit for Rory McIlroy's shot shape and the general way in which he plays golf than Quail Hollow. He's got 4 victories here. Number 2, not far behind him, Scotty Scheffler. And then it goes Hideki number 3, which I think will be a pretty popular bet this week. And I played quite a bit of him at Truist, and he's playing quite well. We'll see what he does on Sunday at the Truist. Then it goes Fleetwood, Lowry, Xander, JT, Spieth, Hatton, Morikawa, Hovland, Corey Connors, Patrick Cantlay, Keith Mitchell, Daniel Berger, Bud Cauley, Keegan Bradley. Love Bud Cauley next week as a sleeper. Keegan Bradley, Sung J.M., Russell Henley, Tony Finau. Tony Finau was a huge DK play for me last week. I think he's going to start playing some better golf, or at least return on an upward trajectory to being one of the better American golfers in the world. So, in my opinion, and I've thought a lot about this over the last couple of days, I view Scotty, Rory, and Bryson in a tier of their own this week. I talked about it directly after the Masters finished. I said Bryson is the 3rd best player in the world, and the PGA Championship odds board should be those 3 guys and then everyone else. And the market basically went there. And now in the process, people had the opportunity to pick up some really solid Bryson numbers, right? Like anything above 14-1 on Bryson this week is a really great bet, in my opinion. And you should feel very good holding that ticket. I pretty much believe that it is a toss-up between those 3 guys. And in terms of their win equity and chances to actually win this golf tournament, it's kind of a coin flip between those 3 for me. I would still probably rank Bryson 3rd of those 3 just by default, but my difference this week between Bryson and Rory and Scotty is smaller than even what the market says. I mean, the market right now has Rory and Scotty at essentially 5-1 and Bryson at 12-1. If I was doing it, I would make that gap personally even a little bit tighter. I would make it almost like Rory and Scotty at 6 and Bryson at 10, right? I would make that gap even a little bit smaller. So, you know, and even Bryson at 14-1 right now, which I believe FanDuel has, I think that might even go down. Like, I think there's a decent chance that Bryson settles this week across the board at 12 or 11 or 12-1, and he's already on that track. I mean, it's already become a bit in my group chat where I'm telling, my friends, every single person that I've talked to and listened to already is picking Bryson to win the PGA Championship. And from a course fit perspective, I can't disagree with that one bit. I mean, I think these 3 golfers right now have very, very little weaknesses in their games, are all very solid course fits for Quail Hollow, particularly the way that they're putting right now. And I just personally think that those 3 guys are a cut above everybody else. And from a DFS perspective, the most exposure that you can get to those 3 guys, the better. I mean, playing Rory and Bryson in the same lineup is tough, but you can do it. you can do it. And I think without a shadow of a doubt, because it's golf, one of those three will underperform. But I would say without a shadow of a doubt that at least two out of those three guys will be there and be highly relevant in the tournament. Now, the Zagger in me doesn't want to be on Bryson because everybody else is on Bryson, and that's no fun. But I just think there's kind of two ways to bet this golf tournament. Way number one is pick your option between those three. Of those three guys, pick the guy that you personally think is going to win, because there's not a lot separating them for me in terms of win equity, and statistically. Or I would bet the without the big three market, and you can try and call your shot on who you think is the most likely to win this tournament, or finished highest if one of those three wins. And I will say this, the counter argument to everything I'm saying is that this big three right now that you have in Bryson, Scotty, Rory, I think that their advantage at Oakmont is actually going to be even greater than the advantage that they have this week. Like, I do believe that a player can black out on these greens and win this golf tournament on the strength of their putter. And I don't know if that's attainable at Oakmont. I mean, I truly think with the way that those three are driving the ball right now and the way that Scotty is hitting his middle to long irons, like, they really just it's going to be who putts the best out of those three who ends up winning Oakmont. Where at this golf course, I do think that there is going to be a guy. Your guess is as good as mine in terms of predicting that guy, but I do think there will be a guy that putts the living lights out, and competes with these three players. But again, that pathway is narrow, and you are hoping for like the greatest putting performance of a player's career to have to go toe to toe with these three based on the way they're putting. And that's really the big kicker here for me in why I feel this way about this big three, is that all of them are putting so well right now. And this would be an entirely different story if like Scotty was putting the way that he was in 2024, or Rory was having a poor putting season, or Bryson, was hitting the living shit out of the ball on live, but he wasn't making putts and winning golf tournaments. The fact that all three of these players are all in some of the best putting form of their career. I mean, this is literally the best putting over a 2-month stretch that we have ever seen out of Scotty Scheffler. He's now had 3 starts this year where he's like really actually spiked with the putter. He's gained over 3.5 strokes with the putter. This is hands down the best that Scotty Scheffler has ever putted. And we saw last week at the Byron Nelson that he is still capable as well of those plus 13 spike approach performances as well. The only thing that he's added to his game this year, the ball striking really hasn't fallen off that much. The only thing that's really added to his game this year is that he's putting the living lights out. So that's probably where my head is at. I think that you need to pick one of those 3 guys, and based on the odds, it obviously makes the most sense to bet Bryson. The only counter argument to that is everybody that I know is on Bryson. Our entire Discord is on Bryson. All the other people doing content are on Bryson. Is it really that easy? Maybe. It could be that easy. But is the most obvious guy going to win the first two major championships of the year, or are we going to get some chaos? Because the Masters outcome was the correct outcome. It was like the outcome that should have happened. Rory was playing the best golf, was the best course fit all of the trends outside of the Augusta boogeyman. And like, whether you were on Rory or not, I think everybody can walk away from that Masters and be like, okay, the outcome that made the most sense heading in happened here. The outcome to me that objectively makes the most sense by a mile is one of those three guys winning, and Bryson is by far the best odds. So, he is going to be in a completely different level, in my opinion, in terms of popularity, because most people are going to look at this and say, I think a lot of the casuals will be on Rory or Scotty, but I would say most people that bet week in and week out on the PGA Tour and are a little bit more in the weeds and understand like how to build a card a little bit better. Every single one of those people that does this week in and week out is going to take the 12 or the 14 on Bryson as opposed to the 5 on Rory or Scotty. Everyone's going to do it, and I can't say I entirely disagree with it that much.
But for me, I always need to zag a little bit. So I'm going to pick Scotty this week. And it's been, the last time I picked Scotty, if you count the tour championship at Eastlake, I was on him at Eastlake, but that doesn't really count. The last time I was on Scotty in a real way from a betting perspective was Pinehurst, and that certainly did not work out. I think I bet him at plus 450 at Pinehurst, and I'm holding out hope that there's a chance maybe I get 6-1 on Scotty. I'm hoping that everyone just keeps betting Bryson, and maybe that Bryson number comes down a little bit closer to 10, and maybe the Scotty number comes up a little bit closer to 6. But even at 5-1, it's a little expensive and a little overexposed than I typically like. I generally really don't like betting guys at under 7-1. So I'm spending a little bit more than I usually would, but I just think he's at a different level than anyone else right now, and I don't see anyone beating him, and I would rather choose between the big three and pick the right guy between the big three than try and figure out who's going to win the without market and throw a bunch of darts at guys that I just don't think are at the level of the three guys that I really think could win this golf tournament. And I know that the knock on Scotty is that he hasn't played Quail Hollow before, really. I mean, the only time he's really played this golf course was in the President's Cup, and he wasn't even that good in the President's Cup. I think this is a phenomenal golf course for Scotty Scheffler. I mean, what isn't? But there's levels to it, right? And I think even as far as Scotty golf courses go, I would put Quail Hollow on the higher end in terms of this is really, really going to benefit Scotty Scheffler. I think if we think about who Scotty Scheffler is and where Scotty Scheffler thrives versus the times when Scotty Scheffler struggles, and there's really only two scenarios where Scotty Scheffler really actually struggles. Scenario number one is when he loses a gazillion strokes putting, and I feel pretty damn good about the way that he's putting right now. And scenario number two is like what we saw at Pinehurst last year, or what you've seen sometimes at Open Championships in the past, where if you give Scotty adversity, right? If they're at Pinehurst, for example, or typically at Open Championships, you get a lot of wind, you get a higher miss fairway penalty. Scotty can get discombobulated sometimes when outcomes are out of his control, because he's the best in the world at creating the same outcome over and over and over again. And that's why he continues to dominate on these PGA Tour overseeded golf courses, because they're golf courses with a very highly predictable outcome. And Quail Hollow, to be honest with you, is more of a PGA Tour, particularly when it's playing soft, a PGA Tour traditional outcome than it is a random major championship venue that is going to confuse Scotty and create adversity for him. These are the golf courses that Scotty loves more than anything else in golf. The golf courses that are overseeded and are going to give him a predictable outcome on his shots. And I think Scotty is going to look at Quail Hollow and say to himself, I know it's all out in front of you at Quail, right? There's no tricks whatsoever. You're not going to be spooked out or confused by weird things happening if you miss fairways. If you miss fairways on this golf course, you are getting a highly predictable outcome out of that Bermuda overseeded rough. And I look at all of the golf courses that Scotty has done his best work on. Memorial Park, Bay Hill's another great one, with the way that Quail Hollow is going to have at least some thicker rough this year. It's going to play a lot more off the tee to a golf course like Bay Hill. Obviously, Augusta as well, in terms of the short grass everywhere. I already mentioned Memorial Park. That's another perfect one, but you run through it and it's like, I looked at all of the golf courses that have similar, big undulating, fast, firm green complexes with short grass all over the place. Scotty's number one in that around the greens. Is going to be a great chipping and putting golf course for him. Poa Trivialis overseed has been his best surface historically. He's the best iron player in the world, and he ranks top 10 in proximity 175 to 200 and proximity 200 yards plus. If I am placing how Scotty Scheffler beats Bryson, is that Scotty Scheffler is a much better approach player than Bryson, and Bryson can win this golf tournament with his driver and with his putter. Scotty Scheffler can win this golf tournament with his driver, his putter, and his iron play. Like, he could just gain 10 strokes on approach on any given week and win this golf tournament, right? And the big main kicker for me here, and why I actually would feel better about him at a golf course like Quail Hollow right now, as opposed to maybe Oakmont, is the way that he's putting the ball. And he's putted so well on these Poa Trivialis greens in the past. He's putted so well at golf courses like Memorial Park that have like that such similar large undulating overseeded green complexes. And I think at the end of the day, like, all of these guys have two majors. Scotty has two majors, Bryson has two majors, Xander has two majors, Rahm has two majors, JT has two majors. Who's going to be the guy from this era that's going to get their third major first? I'm probably going to take Scotty at the end of the day. So, I think I think we'll get a Bryson, Scotty, Rory. I mean, again, it's really no shots against Rory whatsoever. I just don't know if I see this floodgates situation that others might, but I think the way that I would do it is probably because they got the DFS pricing wrong. So it's really hard to justify playing Scotty Scheffler in DraftKings over Rory when Scotty's $1,000 more expensive than Rory. Like, that should not be the case, right? Like, if you look at the market right now, Rory and Scotty are neck and neck, and that's probably the way that it should be. There should not be a $1,000 gap in pricing for Scotty Scheffler versus Rory McIlroy. So I think like a great way to do it if you're choosing between those guys is like play Rory and DFS and maybe bet Scotty. And that's certainly the direction that I'm leaning towards based on how the market is with DFS pricing. But that would be my pick. I don't see anyone beating him on this golf course. I can give you the guys that I think are great. I don't know, sleepers. I will say this, and maybe it's just because I'm so tired of like Cantlay and Morikawa and I mean Hovland too. Really, just Cantlay and Morikawa and like playing Fleetwood and JT a bunch. I kind of feel like this is a really good spot for some of the live guys. And I really may end up trying my hand at going pretty heavy on some of the live players in DFS. I really like this spot for Neiman. I think that we are going to hear from Brooks Koepka in a major this year. I think he's due for a great major performance. I dove into all of the stats with like how these guys are really playing on live, and I've tried to watch the last couple of tournaments on live as well, or at least catch pieces of it. I don't think Brooks is actually playing as bad as his results would suggest. Obviously, Neiman's hitting the cover off the ball. And again, I continue to be bullish on Rahm. I think Rahm is a few minor details off where I don't think Rahm is sharp enough to win a major right now. And I don't think over the course of 72 holes, Rahm can beat Scotty right now, or even beat Bryson or Rory for that matter either. But I don't think he's far off, and I wouldn't be shocked if he won the US Open or the Open Championship. I think he just needs to keep building a little bit more, and I think he's going to show up at Quail Hollow and have a great week. As another quote unquote sleeper, I love Tyrrell Hatton on this golf course a lot. I mean, I'm not just going to blindly play all of the live players. A lot of the reason why I'm talking about the live players more on this podcast now is because I've done my breakdown and my deep dive into all of the live players and a lot of the PGA Tour players. I'm waiting till things finish up at Philly Cricket before I really deep dive them. Like, I want to see what Hideki does on Sunday. I want to see what Fleetwood does on Sunday, and Xander, obviously, as well. Well, let me say this on Cantlay, because I bet Cantlay this week, and Cantlay is hitting the ball so well right now. Like, he's top 10 heading into Sunday. I don't know what he's going to do on Sunday, but it seems like he'll finish top 10 again. Cantlay's like the biggest asshole to ever pick up a golf club. It's just so infuriating because he's playing really, really good golf this year. And it would be so much easier if he wasn't playing good golf. But the guy just doesn't win, and he doesn't even really contend, but his stats continue to be so good. And I shouldn't be mad about it because, he's, like, Cantlay won the most sweat-free, easy matchup for me this week over Ludwig, which paid for my outright investment in him and then some. And as a core play in DFS, like, he's certainly not going to hurt me if I don't do well in DFS this week. Certainly not going to be because of Cantlay. Morikawa was a bigger mistake and problem for me, and playing Hovland at all was like the real problem. But God, I just want him to win a golf tournament so freaking badly. And he just won't fucking do it. He just has that same Saturday round over and over and over again, where he doesn't like shoot himself out of the tournament. Like, again, he's going to finish top 10 this week, but he never just 2 years straight of him never just going out and taking it. But yeah, I mean, who else do I like for Quail? I mentioned Bud as a sleeper. I like Kitayama as a deep sleeper here. But I think I'm like pretty heavily leaning towards betting Scotty at 5-1. And then a pretty Bryson Rory heavy approach at the top in DFS with some Neiman, Hatton, and Brooks sprinkled in there is the way that I'm going, interestingly enough. So that will do it from me. Hop in our Discord. My opinions on this golf course and this tournament assuredly will change before we get to Wednesday night. This is just hopefully your entry point into PGA week, but the real magic happens in the Discord and over at Inside Sports Network. I think you're really going to want to use this ownership this week and be a part of this community. I just, the level of analysis, our members are so like smart and sharp, and I'm so proud of the quality of analysis that we have there. Our guy Twitterless Steve will be in the Discord with some great golf course information as well throughout the course of the week. I mean, I would put his golf course information up against anyone. He does such great work for us. And same deal with Rishi and Kyle and Capper and Brian and everybody that Cam and Chris behind the scenes. So we'd love to have you join us and try us out for a week. These are the weeks to do it if you have any interest. And good luck with your bets the rest of the day. Go Lowry Straka, I would say, for me, and need a big final round from Cantlay and Morikawa. But enjoy the rest of the Truist Championship, and I will see you back on this podcast feed. I'll see you on Monday for our DFS show with RB, who just hit another winner, I believe, on the DP World Tour this morning. So thank you again. Your support means a lot this week, especially if you don't want to join Inside Sports Network, but you want me to keep putting out these podcasts for free. It's a big battle right now with my team, and battle is a very strong word. I don't know why I described it that way. That's just not accurate. But you know, there's a lot of calls to make this podcast, the Sunday Solo Pod, behind the paywall. And I don't know if I want to do that, because this podcast is responsible for my entire career. And I don't know if I'm ready to give up making it publicly accessible for everyone. But the biggest argument that I could pose to keep it free forever is, you know, if you guys throw a like and subscribe on YouTube, retweet it around on Twitter, if it helps you at all, and you know, you don't want all that extra level of stuff behind the paywall at Inside Sports Network, and you just get a lot of value out of consuming the free stuff on YouTube. When you share it around and you know, share it to a new person this week, maybe that's looking to make some money on the PGA Championship and wants a handicap of how the golf course is going to play, and who might play well, that stuff means more than you know. So again, enjoy the rest of the Truist, and I will see you back on this podcast feed next week. Cheers.